The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Equestrian Queensland webinar on insurance. So we've got Will from Gow-Gates who'll be talking to you about the EA club insurance policy and answering any of your questions. So this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Equestrian Queensland website. So from the EQ website, if you go to member resources and down to webinars, that's where you'll find all of our webinars. And this one should hopefully be available by the end of this week or early next week. So hopefully you can all hear me and you should be able to see Will's screen, which has got the Equestrian Australia Insurance Program on it. Now you should have a little box where you can ask any questions throughout. So some of you have already sent some questions through, which Will has incorporated into his presentation. And if you've got any questions, just pop them into the questions box and we'll try and get those answered at the end. So I'll hand over to Will now.
Thanks very much, everyone, for joining me. I'm happy to take everyone through the EA Club Insurance Program today. What I've done is I've incorporated a lot of the frequently asked questions that we do get about the club insurance, as well as some of the ones, as well as the questions that have been submitted by some of the participants. What I'll do, I'll take you through what policies are included and sort of what activities are covered and some of the requirements around the insurance that aren't necessarily set by the insurers, but do sit hand in hand with EA's rules and how that's all applied. And then also to take you through what to do in the event of claims. But to start off with, as you can see, we're on the EA insurance plan website. So it's the Gow-Gates website that's dedicated to the EA insurance plan. Through there, up the top, there's a link that says what is covered. And from there, this takes you through sort of what some of the policies are. But up the top there, there's a link to the clubs section. So this is specific information around when you're covered as a club, so what you're covered for, how the policy works. As you can see, there are actually 4 areas of cover that are included in the club insurance package. So personal accident provides cover for injuries to individuals. In the case of the club insurance, that is only for your voluntary workers. So that doesn't provide any cover to riders or anyone riding or engaged in actual participation in club events. It provides cover for voluntary workers at club events. So, for example, if someone's manning the car park or judging or officiating or cooking the barbecue or anything like that, those volunteers are covered for personal accident, but riders themselves aren't covered. In terms of riders having any cover, they would need to be EA members and rely on their own personal membership or personal insurance through the EA membership to claim personal accident. As a club, you also have the public liability cover that includes the professional indemnity cover. So that covers your liability for bodily injury or property damage to a third party. So that's if someone alleges that you've caused them injuries. And effectively that they're suing you for causing those injuries. Professional indemnity is similar circumstances but arising out of a breach of your professional duty. So, for example, an official acting at your event, if there's an allegation that they've breached their professional duty as an official, there is cover for them through the club for those kinds of things. Finally, there is management liability, which is an enhanced directors and officers insurance policy. So it provides cover for the club for directors and officers, as well as cover for those types of claims made against the entity itself, as well as claims for things like employment practices liability. So allegations of things like bullying and harassment to any employees and things that you might have. In terms of the policy limits, the voluntary workers personal accident mirrors the members insurance through EQ membership. So $100,000 for permanent injuries, $500 a week for loss of income, and up to $3,500 for non-Medicare medical expenses. In terms of the public liability and the professional indemnity, they're covered $20 million they're covered for $20 million. In terms of the excesses on those policies, there is no excess for claims arising out of allegations of bodily injury to a third party, but for the professional indemnity section or for public liability claims that arise out of property damage, there's a $2,500 excess for those claims. I suppose the real crux of the questions that we usually get on this program are what activities are covered. So what are you able to do? What constitutes the business that an equestrian club is covered for? So you've taken out this policy through Equestrian Australia as affiliated clubs, and it's covering you for your activities as an affiliated club. So what is the scope of cover? What's the scope of activities and the scope of cover for an affiliated club acting within its affiliation to EA? So that would definitely include things like conducting your events, conducting training days that are organised by the club, and clinics that are organised by the club working bees, fundraisers that are organised for the club. So things like social events and fundraisers, be they on-site or off-site. So that could be a club presentation day at a local hall. That could be a barbecue at Bunnings. Activity, in a nutshell, it's activities that are organised and conducted by the club. So where they are officially conducted and run by club personnel or people acting for and on behalf of the club. What doesn't fit into that classification are things where they're not actually directly conducted by the club. So, for example, members using your facility for their own private use, where they just come and book the facility. That's not an activity that's actually run by the club. That is purely that's purely your members just using your facility. If that's something that you're doing as a club, we need to arrange additional cover for you as the property owner and effectively for effectively a venue hire activity that you're doing. The club itself hiring out its facility to third parties, even if that is your members, is not considered a club activity for the purpose of the policy. So if you are doing activities such as that, we can arrange you additional cover quite easily, but it's not something that's covered under the core EA insurance plan. Other things that sort of fit within that, that would be if the club was offering agistment services on a commercial basis. So if your members or members of the public were agisting their horses on your property, a lot of this comes down to the idea that you're covered as a club to run club activities. If you have additional exposures because you have full-time management of your facility, you own the facility, or your lease with the council says you can do whatever you want with it, even beyond purely using it as an equestrian club, so you can then go and hire it out or things like that, they're not things that are necessarily automatically covered under the EA club insurance, and we'd need to arrange additional cover for those activities that you're doing. So like I said, we can definitely arrange additional cover, but under the core program, that's not something that's automatically covered. Another question that comes up quite regularly are around the rules and requirements for anything to do with how you need to conduct an event. So what rules do you need to abide by? What medical personnel need to be present? What what helmets people need to use? All those kind of things. The insurance policy itself is actually silent on those requirements. What you need to do is abide by the rules that are set by EA. So EA's website includes all its policies and bylaws. I suppose the crucial one to look at in this instance are the general regulations, which I'm just hovering over there, which are on EA's site, and also down the bottom, the discipline rules and regulations for the particular discipline that you're conducting. So the insurers don't specify or mandate how events are to be run. That's obviously the remit of EA. It's not the insurer's job to impose what sort of medical personnel need to be in attendance or anything like that. That's not their job. The insurers have, however, offered cover to EA affiliated clubs on the basis and on the understanding that those clubs will abide by their requirements under their affiliation. your requirements under your affiliation are to abide by the rules and regulations as set by EA. So the insurers, so basically the policy expectation and the policy requirement is that you comply with EA's rules. EA's rules go into what type of helmets are required. They go into the types of medical personnel and the standard of medical personnel that needs to be engaged at different events, the type of officials that need to be engaged and the role of all those officials. In a general sense, you need to abide primarily by your discipline rules, and if there's nothing under the discipline rules, then it will revert back to adhering to the general regulations. So the crucial part of that is we aren't the ones who will arbitrate on, for example, what type of helmets people need to use or how those rules need to be applied or what type of medical personnel need to be at an event. We will just refer you back to EA's rules, but the insurer's requirement is that you do abide by EA's rules. To play that out a bit further, the policies, the public liability policy is there to cover you if there's an allegation that you've been negligent, that you've breached your duty of care or that you've been negligent in causing someone's injury or causing property damage. So if inadvertently, by accident or something like that, someone went out wearing the wrong helmet or, there was another minor breach of the EA rules that happened inadvertently and wasn't done deliberately, then obviously in that situation, that's exactly what the insurers are there for. On the flip side, if you are acting outside your affiliation, outside the general regulations, outside the discipline regulations, knowingly and deliberately, then the insurers may be entitled in that circumstance to refuse or reduce your claim because you're actually no longer acting as an affiliated club. You're in breach of your affiliation requirements, and the insurers may then, depending on the circumstances at that point, be entitled to say, well, no, you're actually not acting as an EA affiliated club. We're insuring you to be an affiliated club. You're in breach of your affiliation, and that's an issue that could jeopardize a claim in an extreme circumstance where you're actively acting outside the EA rules and requirements. The other questions we get quite often are around how to apply for the EA insurance. So not just how to apply, but how to correctly calculate what you need to, or how you need to declare your club activities under the insurance application. So EA's website has the insurance page, or as affiliated clubs, you'll all be sent the insurance renewal form. But for the purpose of this, the club insurance application form at the moment for this year is on the EA website on the insurance page. The main question we get are around what is considered to be a horse activity day and what is considered to be a participant for the purpose of the declaration. So as you'll see on the second page here, you've got your matrix of how you calculate your number of participants and number of horse activity days. As you can see at the top, the number of participants declared needs to include the total number of riders at your event. One rider competing at 3 different club events throughout the year counts as 1 participant. So if I, Will MacArthur, ride at that club 3 times during the year, I'm 1 participant. At the same time, if 3 individuals rock up and they just turn up for 1 event, they are 3 additional participants. So effectively, it's the total number of distinct human beings who participate in your club activities throughout the year. So, for example, some different calcs. 1 person riding at 5 events is 1 person. 2 people riding at 5 events each are 2 people. 20 people riding at 1 event each are 20 people. So if a different 20 people rock up for the next event, that's another 20 people. So you need to consider and estimate the total number of individual people, distinct people, who will be riding at your club throughout the year. So for example, if you have 50 members who ride week in, week out, who ride at all 6 events that you have throughout the year, there's your 50 core people. If for one of your events, you're going to also open it up and have an extra 20, you've now got 70 participants. It's not the maximum number at any one event. It's not the total number of entries across the year. It's the total number of individual people who will ride across the year. In terms of what is a horse activity day is any any day, club day, club organised day that involves that would involve a horse being present, being used, being moved, anything like that in your club environment. So if you're having a 3-day event, but horses are arriving the day before or 2 days before and leaving the day after, your 3-day event could become 5 or 6 horse activity days, because horses are present for 5 or 6 days in that scenario, and you need to aggregate that across the year. It's not, I run a 1 day, I run 2 single 1-day events. That's 2 days, assuming that the horses are arriving that morning and arriving that day and departing that day. If the horses are arriving beforehand and leaving the day before and leaving the day after, then your number of horse activity days is increasing. It's very important for the total collection of the correct pool, the correct rating for your clubs, that you are correctly declaring the number of participants that you have and the number of horse activity days that you have. If throughout the year you increase the number of participants or number of horse activity days, that's fine. You can go to Equestrian Australia and get that reclassified and bumped up. But ideally, you should be able to budget throughout the year for the total number of horse activity days and the total number of participants that you'll be having in terms of your annual planning, and correctly classify yourselves in terms of those days. Like I said, it is crucially important that is correctly declared. You do have a duty of disclosure to the insurers to correctly declare that. And again, if it's found that you have effectively misled the insurers in that declaration, then there can be an issue in terms of coverage and claims in those circumstances. So it is very important that you do correctly declare that. Going a step further and looking at, in a worst case scenario, what happens in the event of a claim. I'll confine this more to the public liability side, because that sort of gives the best impression of what to do in the event of a claim. It's probably the most understandable examples to give. So I'll give 2 examples, one of a sort of a minor claim, but one that can actually prove the most problematic, and obviously then go into sort of a major claim and how to treat that. So going first to the sort of the minor claim on the public liability side, one that we do see coming up regularly at clubs is damage to vehicles. So a horse gets out, a horse bolts, gets out into the car park and bumps into some vehicles and does a couple of $1,000s worth of damage to either one vehicle or a number of vehicles. In that situation, it can get quite fraught, and the role of the insurer can get quite misunderstood. Bear in mind that from a public liability perspective, and in all these insurances, we as Gow-Gates are acting for you as the insured. So we are acting in your interests as our client. If damage to a vehicle occurs, there's no point providing the owners of the damaged vehicle with our number, because they're not our client. They're not, we can't really help them out. We're there to help you in minimizing your exposure to that incident. So what you need to do is, well, for starters, do not admit liability. So don't offer to pay, don't offer to make good on the damage. You can obviously apologize for the fact that it's happened, but you can't admit liability. What you should do in this circumstance is direct the insurers to claim through their own motor vehicle insurance. What you then do is you notify us, but the insurer, the third-party insurers, the vehicle owners insurers will send you a formal letter of demand, just as if this was a motor vehicle accident on the road. So they'll then write to you and say, we've been advised by our client that you were responsible for damage to this vehicle. You can then provide that to us, and then our liability insurer, the underwriter, will deal with the vehicle underwriter to get that all sorted out. That provides you with sort of the most seamless approach to getting that matter dealt with as quickly as possible and as smoothly as possible. like I said, we can't really assist the vehicle owners because they're not our client. They can't make a claim directly on your policy. You're making a claim on your policy to cover your liability exposure to that third party. If we go a step further, so that was the situation if a horse causes that damage. A different scenario that's similar, but there are some distinctions, revolves around what if a tree branch fell and damaged a car. In this circumstance, we might go to the idea that this wasn't on property that you as a club necessarily owned, but property that you leased from a council, and where the council was responsible for maintaining the maintenance of the grounds and for the upkeep of the trees and things like that. So in that circumstance, whilst it's happened at your club event and you need to notify us for the purpose of a public liability claim, your insurers aren't necessarily going to admit liability when the vehicle owners write to them. They would actually more likely say, look, this is actually the responsibility of the local council and you should be writing to them. The reason that we've told the vehicle owners to go and claim through their own insurance is that through this process, they're not out of pocket. Their insurers are handling the claim. You've notified your insurers, and this is then all being handled at the insurer's level. If you had if you directed the people who'd had the vehicles damaged, the third party, to come to us, your insurers may have turned around and said, no, we're not liable in this circumstance. And all that's going to happen then is that the vehicle owners are going to keep coming back to you and pressuring you to make that payment. So we're trying in this situation to avoid all those headaches, to avoid all that running around, and to actually properly arrange this through the insurance program. Sending the people who've had their vehicles damaged our way doesn't actually help with that process at all. You're the client, you're the ones making a claim on your public liability policy, and we need to be dealing with you. The individual vehicle owners, if they want to expedite matters, should be going and claiming through their own vehicle insurance, and then their vehicle insurer can work out the cross claim against your liability insurance policy. On the much more serious claims, so major property damage, serious injuries and things like that, they can come in, those sort of claims can come in two ways. One, where it's obvious that something's happened at the time, like a catastrophic injury and things like that. In that circumstance, best thing to do is obviously take detailed notes, take detailed incident reports of the circumstances that happened, collect details of witnesses, go through your normal practical reporting of the circumstances of what happened, who saw it, what was done, all those kind of things that you need from your own club record keeping. At the earliest opportunity then, involve us. So notify us of the circumstances, and then we can assist you in maintaining some of those records, asking some further questions and giving you the information that we feel that the insurers will need if a claim was to arise. So the first sort of step in that is really incident reporting, collecting good information, understanding what happened, why it happened, and who was there and who can assist if a claim does arise. Bear in mind that a public liability claim is actually really triggered by the allegation that's made against you, not necessarily the actual fact or circumstance. So, there may be a serious injury that's done, but no claim ever arises. Likewise, it may be a minor injury, but down the track, someone decides to claim against you. So the actual liability policy itself is triggered when someone basically sends you a letter of demand, but doesn't stop us from collecting all that information, putting all that, putting the pieces of the jigsaw together in the meantime, so that we know, excuse me, so that we have a good foundation to start that claim down the track. In the case of, so the other way that a claim like that might manifest is not where it's obvious at the time that there's going to be a claim, but where down the track, you receive a letter of demand from someone who was injured at one of your events. Their horse might have been injured, or the rider might have, suffered an injury. Some property might have been damaged or something like that. And that could come, 1, 2, 3 years after the event. In that situation, when you receive that demand, notify us immediately. Send it straight through to us. How the public liability policy responds is that you're covered for your defence costs and damages that are awarded against you. So in this circumstance, the insurers can effectively take carriage of the claim. They will appoint solicitors to defend you. They will be on the hook for any damages that are awarded against you. So the first step's not to run off to the local solicitor and get them to start writing letters and doing all that sort of stuff. The insurers can actually take all that over and handle that for you. The insurers will do that. So the first step to do is to notify us. The insurers will appoint solicitors who will get in touch with you, who'll do a factual investigation, who'll meet with and interview or speak to the relevant people at your end who know what might have happened back in the day. They'll request any records that you do have and all that sort of thing. So the first thing to do in that is notify us immediately, send through the letter of demand and any documentation that you do have, and we can handle that from there. So obviously the club will be involved in the process, but at the same time, in terms of the actual appointment of solicitors and things like that, the insurers have an expert panel of solicitors who've got equine experience who can assist. We're talking about major national law firms here. So the policy response effectively is to arrange the best possible legal defence for you in the first instance. I suppose overall in that, the real importance is when an incident occurs, record keeping, and incident reporting is vital. When an allegation is made, notification is vital, because the sooner we get notified, the sooner we can, the longer lead-in time the insurers and the lawyers have got to actually put together a solid defence for the club. That process goes for the public liability, but also for the professional indemnity and the management liability insurance as well. So the insurers will arrange the defence, notify us as quickly as possible so that we can really be a part of that process. In terms of some of the other questions that came up during or in the collection for this, one was does the insurance include, or does the EA insurance program include property insurance? It doesn't. So your policies include personal accident, public liability, professional indemnity, and management liability. That doesn't provide cover for your contents, for your buildings, for your jumps, or for video recording equipment or anything like that that you've got. If it is third-party equipment, there is a certain level of cover for goods in care, custody, and control under the public liability, but that is only where you are legally liable for causing that loss or damage. In terms of just having cover for your property, you would need to arrange separate property insurance, a small biz pack or a small property insurance policy. We can definitely obviously assist you in arranging that and set that up for you, but there's no automatic cover for your contents, your jumps, your video recording equipment, anything like that under the EA insurance plan. Another question we got concerned whether whether there were restrictions on who can ride at certain events, be it because of previous injuries or disability or anything like that. Again, it goes back to the EA rules. There is nothing specified in the insurance about who can ride or at what level or anything like that. So obviously the EA discipline rules and the EA bylaws do deal with, people's progression through the levels. They deal with who can ride at certain, at certain events and what experience is required. In terms of things like riders with disabilities, again, there's nothing under the EA insurance that deals with it. Obviously, under discrimination law, you can't discriminate against people with a disability in terms of their riding. From a club risk management perspective, what we would recommend is that you ensure that they are medically fit to ride, that they are cleared by their doctor to ride in the activities that are conducted at your club. So sometimes people will put forward a certificate saying, yes, I'm fit to ride a horse. In certain circumstances, we would actually say we would want some, you should go and obtain for your own risk management purposes, some more specific specific information, especially if, for example, if you're a jump club or an eventing club, to say, okay, yes, you might be fit to ride a horse, but are you fit to ride, you know, to ride cross country? Are you fit to go show jumping? Because that is a different level of risk. You obviously can't, you know, if someone, you know, says, you know, provides evidence they are medically fit to ride, they're cleared to ride, then at that point you actually can't, you know, under discrimination law, you can't really discriminate against them and prevent them from riding. But you do need to satisfy yourselves as club, you know, directors, for the safety of all people concerned, including the other members, that you're not putting them at risk. And how you can do that is we'd recommend that someone, you know, that you do recommend that they do get a medical certificate to clear them to ride. So that we found that is a happy medium. It won't be ideal in all situations, and obviously in this circumstance, every situation needs to be played out on its merits. And your role as club committee members, club directors, is to manage those situations as they come up. We can obviously assist on a case-by-case basis, as can Equestrian Queensland and EA, in terms of how to deal with those situations. But, you know, in a general sense, in some of the circumstances we've had in the past, requesting people provide that, you know, evidence of the you know, doctor's clearance for them to ride has been something that's been appropriate and been able to be provided. That's probably the majority of the questions that came through to us in this circumstance. Again, the website is a great resource for details on the policies themselves. It does stick to the policy interpretation. If there are questions around how to conduct the events and things like that, we do refer you back to EA's site around the, you know, the policies and bylaws and things like that. But yeah, the Equestrian Insurance site does have good information. It's got the program overview that's very, you know, it's got the basic information of what the policy is and how it works, and some frequently asked questions. It's also where you can go and download your certificates of currency. So as a club, you can go in and select that you're a club, and all the relevant clubs who are insured under the policy are included there. So, you know, recommend you use that resource if you need certificates of currency. It's also got the risk management information up there. So the club induction tutorial, we recommend that you go through, but also some good risk management, documentation. So the event day inspections are a sort of step-by-step guide to some things to look out for before your event. Serious injury report can also form part of your incident reporting, as can EA's incident report. We've also got the risk management app that's available through the App Store that actually has the event day inspection in a format that's, you know, online. You can upload photos alongside it, and it's automatically stored at our end. So we've got access to it if we need it in the event of a claim. So do recommend that you go and download the risk management app and utilize that before any of your events going forward. Happy to throw it back now to see if there's any further questions that have come through.
Okay, so just one question, Will. Are there any sort of guidelines as to how long a club should keep any incident reports? Look, it does depend on the circumstances and depend on the states. At a blanket rule, we recommend 7 years. The statute of limitations has come down a bit in most states to 3 years, but it depends on the sort of the nature of the injury, how old the person was, that kind of thing. But look, as a blanket rule, we'd say 7 years. As a good guideline, but it will depend on circumstances and individual states and things like that. But yeah, if we go with 7 years, that's a good starting point. Just on that as well, we're more than happy to receive them and store them at our end if that is easier for clubs, or if there is a genuine feeling that something more will come of it. More than happy for them to be sent through to us, and we can set up sort of a basic file for some of those as they come in. Great. So, I mean, at the moment, here we go. We've got another question. So, under Pony Club, it's required to have an instructor on site when conducting certain activities such as jumping. Under the EA Public Liability Insurance, is it okay to conduct all activities listed as EA disciplines, including jumping, without having an instructor present? That's a slightly tricky one, I think, Will, isn't it?
Yeah, so again, as we said, with sort of how to conduct the events, that's not something the insurer, that's not a requirement that the insurers set, and likewise for Pony Club, that's not set by the insurers. Again, it comes down to the policies are arranged on the basis that the rules of the sport will be adhered to. So if it's a rule of EA that for certain events that different personnel need to be present, be that instructors, medical personnel, whatever, then that is a requirement of the, that's a requirement of the insurers as well. But at the same time, if under the EA requirements you don't have to necessarily have an instructor present, then the insurers are fine with that. It just comes down to adherence to the rules of EA.
Yeah, and I'm guessing it's also making sure that you adhere to the rules of the grounds that you're hiring. So if it's their grounds, it's not going to matter, whether you're an EA member or a Pony Club member. You need to ensure that you're abiding by the rules of those particular grounds.
Well, in our circumstance, so we would cover the clubs as an EA club to act under EA's rules, purely in that circumstance, purely as the venue hirer. So, if an EA club was using council grounds or Pony Club grounds or whatever it might be, the EA insurer's requirement is purely that you abide by EA's rules. If there are further requirements imposed by who you're hiring, the people you're hiring the ground from, that's not necessarily a requirement of this insurance policy or the way this insurance is set up. But at the same time, if other people are imposing rules under certain venue hire contracts that you've got, then you need to abide by those contracts as well.
Another question that's just come through is about liability waivers. How useful are they, and should a club demand that they are completed by all members?
So, a couple of questions there. The waivers are good in certain ways, and they are weak in others. So the waivers are good in that they do, if they are properly constructed, and if you have to use the actual EA waiver, in that they highlight that the activity is dangerous, and they do highlight that people can't claim against the club as the event organizer for injuries that they receive. They are good in that they highlight that the activity is dangerous. So people can't sort of turn around and claim, well, I had no idea that the activity I was doing was dangerous. At the same time, they aren't an absolute get out of jail free card for clubs. You do need to still provide a safe environment. People could still claim against you, and you'll incur defence costs. So the waivers aren't an absolute get out of jail for you, but they are a useful tool, and they do assist in your defence. The next stage of that is it is a requirement of your affiliation and therefore the insurance that all participants have completed the relevant waivers for their level of participation. EA members, so people who join Equestrian Queensland as direct members, they have signed the relevant waiver as part of their membership application process. So if they're an EA member, they don't need to then sign a waiver when they go and join your club. If someone is not an EA member, so they haven't directly joined EQ and they're just coming down to be a club member of your club, or just to participate in a trial day or an event day at your club, at that point they need to be signing the EA waiver, and that's a condition of your affiliation and therefore a condition of the insurance. So everyone needs to be signing the waiver at some point. If they're an EA EQ member, they've signed it as part of their membership. If they're someone who's just coming down to join your club, they need to be signing that EA waiver at that point, and the club needs to be administering that.
And another question that's just come through is around, grounds maintenance, and are club members, if they're doing grounds maintenance but using their own personal equipment, such as a whippersnipper or a chainsaw, and should the club put any requirements around the use of that sort of equipment?
So club working bee days and club maintenance days and things like that are covered. That's a part of a club. That's a normal club activity. So two sides. The club members are covered from a voluntary workers personal accident perspective in that circumstance. Likewise, it falls under the club's public liability insurance, and the members are covered under that for their particular roles. There's no requirement one way or the other around the use of their own equipment. So there's nothing to stop club members using their own equipment, or the club borrowing their equipment for use on that particular for those particular activities. So I don't think there's any sort of requirements you need to put around them beyond the obvious one, which is because this is a club activity, it falls within the club's jurisdiction. You as club directors have a responsibility for ensuring the safety of the participants in your club activity. So, as clubs, you need to be doing, proper, maintaining a proper safe environment around the way that those activities are conducted. And if you, as club administrators, are seeing something that is unsafe, you need to be putting a stop to it. If you're not comfortable with the standard of the equipment that's been using, or you think some of the practices are unsafe, then you need to step in and address that. So it's not as much a case of saying, no, you can't, people can't use their own equipment. But if you as a club are going, well, we're not comfortable with the standard of that, 20-year-old whippersnipper, or a, certain, you see that there's a mower that is regularly spraying, rocks out because it's, the catcher or the guards or things like that on it aren't up to scratch, then yeah, obviously you as club, club administrators have a duty to be stopping that.
Just a question around different disciplines. So if a club conducts something that's outside of the usual EA disciplines, say, for example, a trail riding day with their members, is this covered in the same way under the EA club insurance policy?
Yeah, look, that can still be a club activity. A club social trail ride can still be could still definitely be a club activity. It's organised if it's organised and conducted by the club. So I suppose two ways that might manifest. It's covered if the club goes, look, the last Friday of the month, or the last weekend of the month. So as part of our club rally day, we're going to have a trail ride as well. It's conducted by the club and under the auspices of the club. That's fine. It's not covered if some members decide to meet at the club grounds and then run a trail ride that's not part of a club activity. So, the second example there is not a club activity. The first example absolutely is a club activity. Obviously, at that point, they still need to be abiding by the EA general regulations. So, for example, under 18s would need to be wearing helmets and things like that, because it is still a club activity and people are still expected to be abiding by the rules under which the club's affiliated.
Great. Well, that's all of the questions that have come through so far. I know a few of those were related to risk management. So last year, so November, Will actually conducted another webinar for us around risk management and how to create your risk management policies. So that is available on the Equestrian Queensland website. So again, to access those, you go to the Equestrian Queensland website and under member resources, select webinars, and there's quite a few different webinars there. Now, in that time, I've just had a couple more questions come through, so I'll ask those. Sure. Will, so if you share the grounds with a non-EA club and this other club has electric fences, what happens if their horse gets out to us?
So I suppose, we understand that the sharing of grounds does happen. There's no requirements around types of fencing under the EA insurance plan. In that circumstance, so to take it in that circumstance, a horse from the neighbouring or the other club has caused damage to this club's property, or to members at this level, that would most likely become a claim against the other club. So people would sue the other club for causing that damage. If in this circumstance they joined the EA club in question into that claim, yeah, based on what's been described there, I can't see any reason why the EA club insurance policy wouldn't respond. I mean, the club's done everything that we're asking of it in that circumstance. So yeah, that would seem to me to be something that the club would be covered for, just to protect the EA club's interests. Obviously, the other club needs to look at its processes and its own insurance arrangements.
And a question around carriage driving. So if a club was holding a carriage driving event and part of the drive is done on a main road, is that covered? And are there any other requirements?
Look, the club insurance does provide cover for carriage driving clubs. You're not confined to any particular location. So two aspects to that. One is, yes, you're covered out on the road. The other requirements would be, you've got to abide by any relevant road rules in terms of what other requirements you've got. There might be requirements from the police or local council in terms of notification and things like that, separate to any insurance things. But from a risk management perspective, you need to go through all those additional steps if they do exist within your area.
Perfect. Well, that looks like that's all of the questions that have come through so far, Will. So hopefully everyone's found this really beneficial. I know insurance is such a complex subject, and you've all had the opportunity to ask questions which are very specific to your club. So hopefully Will's managed to answer all of those in quite a lot of detail for you. So if anyone has got any other questions, feel free to send them through either to myself or, if you've got specific insurance questions, I'm sure Will would be able to answer those.
Absolutely. And we're always happy to take any direct questions that come up, either on the phone or the other one is email us. We're at equestrian@gowgates.com.au. That goes to our, to our EA and equine team. So depending on the nature of the question, the right person will come back to you really quickly if you send it to that email address.
Great. So as I said, we haven't had any other questions come through, so I think we'll finish there. But say this recording will be available on our website by the end of this week or early next week, so feel free to share it with your other club committee members. And say we've got lots of other webinars which will be useful to both your clubs and your members on our website, so please check them out. But thank you everyone for attending, and thanks Will, that was really
Thanks, everyone.